Hello, algebra students. I want to take some time to work through this Unit 2, Lesson 9, Solving with Square Roots. So here is our how-to video on how to work through these. The first thing you will need is to pull up your calculator. You want to have this handy. We will use this a lot when we're solving square root problems. I also like modifying my screen dimensions so I can have both of them up side by side. You can change the sizing to whatever you need. Okay. I think it would be really beneficial to have these next to each other because then you're not flipping back and forth between two screens. So here, we want to determine the following using a calculator, and we're going to round our answers to 3 decimal places. That means we look to the 4th decimal place to determine do we keep or bump that 3rd position. Okay, so I have the square root of 10,000, so I'm going to hit my square root button and type in 10,000, and that gives me a value of 100. So I'm going to type that in. The square root of 69. So if I type that in, that gives me a decimal answer. So again, I'm going to look at that 3rd spot and then over to the 4th spot. With that 4th spot being a 6, I'm going to ask, does that second 6 tell me to keep the first one or bump it up? Anything between 5 and 9, so 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 in that next position over tells us to bump. If it's 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we keep that previous number. So I'm going to type in 8.307. 8.307 because that second 6 tells me to bump. Okay? Lastly, I have the square root of 48, so I'm going to hit my square root button. Again, if you forget about that button, you can do SQRT, and it automatically brings up that square root button. 48, enter, so 6.9282. That 2 is below 5, so that tells me to keep the 8. So I'm going to type in 6.928. And then if I did any work on paper, I can add a question there, but I submit this and there I have my points. So you can practice a similar question, or you can move on to the next question. So question 2 has us solving for x squared. So step 1 is get the x alone. How do we undo squaring then? So if I have x squared equals 16, so x squared equals 16. I undo squaring with the inverse operation of square rooting. So that brings me my x, and then the square root of 16, I actually have the positive or negative version. Now step 1 says get the x alone, leave the answers with the square root. So I'm going to type this in as the square root. I have a square root button, or that same feature of SQRT will bring it up as well. So I'm going to type in my 16 here, square root of 16. Step 2 is where we simplify it. So I'm going to bring down my x, and I'm going to consider the fact that I have a positive and negative, and I can do the square root of 16. If I don't remember that it's 4, so I have positive 4, and I have negative 4. Because remember, negative 4 times negative 4 is still positive 16. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and type in my 4 and negative 4. So I submit my question there. Okay, and let's go to the next question. All right. Let me delete this. So here, again, step 1 is get the x squared alone, but we have a little bit more in the way here because this 25, this minus 25, is with the x squared. So before we take the square root of both sides, we want to get rid of that 25. So remember your equation solving skills. We're going to add that value to both sides. So that leaves me with my x squared. My 25s are eliminated, and I have positive 25 over here. So my x squared here is alone now, so I can say x squared equals 25. Okay, so we're almost done, because now step 2 is get the x alone. So step 2 is now take your square roots. So I'm going to square root both sides. So the square root of x squared equals the square root of 25. So x equals plus or minus the square root of 25. So I'm going to write my square root of 25 because I have the plus or minus sign in front already. Okay? Now we simplify the square root. Now some of you may recognize 25 as a perfect square, and we get 5. So x equals positive or negative 5. So when I type in my answer, I'm going to type in 5 and negative 5. And then I submit my work. Okay? Let's look at question 4. So the next one. Here, again, a little bit more work. We're still going to get our x squared by itself. So x squared minus 4 equals 23. We are going to add 4 to both sides. And we get x squared equals 27. So that's what I type in my first box. X squared equals 27. Okay? Now, get the square root, or get x by itself, so we are going to square root both sides. So that tells me x equals positive or negative square root of 27. So that's what I type into the next box, is the square root of 27. Okay? Now we simplify the square root. Bring this down, and then here we are using our approximations. That I should have been using approximations all the time for our decimal answers. So here, when I take the square root of 27, you see we get a decimal answer. So I want to look at this. Look again, round to the third decimal place. So I'm going to look at that 1, which is to the right of our third place. That 1 tells me to keep the 6 the same. So I am going to type in as my answer 5.196. And it's the positive version and the negative version. So it's approximately 5.196, both positive and negative. So 5.196 and negative 5.196. Now both of our answers will not always be the same digit with opposite signs, and that's what we're going to see in our next and I believe last question. Okay? Because sometimes our adding and subtracting happens after. Okay? So let's take a look here. We have x minus 4, the quantity x minus 4, squared minus 121 equals 0. So our first step is we're going to get the x minus 4 squared, the quantity x minus 4 squared by itself by moving the negative 121. So we're going to add that to both sides. So I have remaining on the left the quantity x minus 4 squared equals 121. Okay, so that's what I'm going to type. I'm going to type my quantity, so parentheses, x minus 4, close parentheses, exponent squared equals 121. Okay, now get the x minus 4 alone. So I need to get rid of our exponent of 2, so that means I'm going to square root both sides. When I square root both sides, squaring and square rooting undo each other, so we're left with what is underneath our square root symbol. So my x minus 4 equals, and then you see our plus or minus, square root of 121. So that's what I'm going to type in over here, is that square root of 121. Close this, square root of 121. Okay, and then simplify the square root. Okay, so we have x minus 4 equals positive 11, and x minus 4 equals negative 11. So option 1 is the positive version, and option 2 is the negative version. So we're going to have positive 11 and negative 11. Okay, and then I need to solve both of those. So that's what I'm going to do in my final step. I have x minus 4 equals positive 11, and I have x minus 4, ooh, that's a terrible 4, equals negative 11. And I'm going to solve each of these. So add 4 to both sides here. X equals 15. Then I'm going to do this one, add 4 to both sides, and we get x equals negative 7. So my answers are 15 and negative 7. So this last one is a little bit more work, but it's also important to recognize that we don't always have the same value with opposite signs as our solution. And that's when you have those parentheses that you need to consider. Okay, so how we group things will impact the output of our function. Okay, and I think that's it. We got 100%. Practice this on your own, because I know we have different numbers in our problem sets, and email us your questions.